We have filed a class action lawsuit against Logan Paul, CryptoZoo Incorporated, and the rest of the CryptoZoo co-founders.
We all remember CryptoZoo, right? It hasn't been that long since Logan Paul tried to get away with all of his scams and his threats of lawsuits, then backing down, and now moving on and pretending as if it's never happened. That's his playbook all the time. But there is a class action lawsuit filed against Logan Paul and the founders of CryptoZoo that's being led by attorney Tom, at least right now.
Hey Tom, how can CryptoZoo's class action waiver and arbitration clause apply to one person, but not another person? I'm confused. And that's a great question, and I did a little bit of foreshadowing of this in my previous video. Okay, so to recap, there is a forced arbitration provision and a class action waiver in their terms of service. I do not want to suggest to you that just because a company puts something in their terms and conditions, that term or condition is automatically enforceable. In fact, I think there are quite a few terms and conditions present in the CryptoZoo agreement that I believe are unenforceable. And on top of that, I think that these terms and conditions as a whole might be unenforceable for a certain class of people.
So obviously there's a lot of legal stuff going into this, and I'm not going to pretend to have any understanding of what's really going on and all the legal framing behind everything here, but it is good and refreshing to see somebody taking on CryptoZoo and trying to represent the people who got screwed over, because Logan's apology about it in three-step plan was a nothing burger. It's really to seem like he's doing something while doing not a lot at all. And it's good to see attorney Tom, someone like him, going after this, because we all know the SEC is not going to do it. They've been sitting on the sideline for everything, along with all the other government regulators. They've been just sitting on the sideline watching everyone just run rampant, scamming everyone in crypto. But the most important part to this, to actually have this class action going through, is the timeline that CryptoZoo went on, and that it was missing parts in its version 1 of its terms and agreements, and that opened them up to obviously the class action that they could have now.
CryptoZoo officially launched to the masses at the end of August, beginning of September 2021. At the time of the launch, the CryptoZoo's terms and conditions actually did not include a class action waiver, nor did they include an arbitration clause. Behind me are the original version 1 of the CryptoZoo terms and conditions. As you can see, it's not very much. This is actually the entire thing.
So the early versions of these terms didn't have the protections in it that they later put in, which is kind of interesting and crazy, because these guys knew that this was not a super well-intended project to begin with. We know that from the group chats that CoffeeZilla was exposing. They all kind of had a little weird type talks into it of market manipulation and how to sell, and it was never really talking about how great of a game this was going to be. So to glance over that fact just kind of shows more about Logan, right? Logan not being the brightest person in the room. He, one, hired the entire group of criminals that worked on CryptoZoo and didn't even bother trying to protect himself while being the most famous and richest person in that entire group. So, Logan might not be the brightest person who was in that group. But they did later update their terms without really telling anybody, to change everything and put in those protections that they probably wished were in there to begin with.
Which brings us to January 20th, 2022, which is the day that we believe CryptoZoo updated their terms and conditions to version 2. Now, version 2 is the terms and conditions that includes the class action waiver and arbitration clause.
So we know that this second version definitely happened. Maybe the date could be thrown up in the air, but they put that in there and just hope that it would retroactively affect everyone, which isn't the case. And that's the problem that came up that attorney Tom puts out there for certain people. So the thing that sucks about it is it doesn't really affect everybody, because it depends where you live. But Logan thinking that this was just going to retroactively protect him for anything that's ever happened, and it just wasn't the case.
So now we have to ask ourselves, does a unilateral modification of a browser wrap agreement retroactively affect a consumer's rights to bring legal action? And the answer to that is yes and no. Simply put, this is going to depend on what jurisdiction the consumer is in. Some jurisdictions have broader consumer rights protections, one of which is the state of Texas, where I'm from and licensed. This is a fairly well-established principle in Texas. Unlike California and Illinois, Texas law does not allow parties to retain an unrestrained right to unilaterally modify arbitration agreements retroactively and without notice. Any attempt to do so renders the arbitration agreement illusory and therefore unenforceable. Under Texas law, contracts must be supported by consideration. In the arbitration agreement context, that consideration is typically a mutual agreement to arbitrate. However, if one party can avoid its promise to arbitrate by amending the agreement retroactively, there is no consideration and therefore an enforceable agreement was never formed.
So there we go. That is the angle for the class action that's happening with CryptoZoo. It's only in effect for Texas right now, which maybe there's other states too that could also join in or also be part of this, or I don't know, but it's at least Texas right now. And it is refreshing to see somebody taking on these scammers and people who just seem to get away with this all the time. CryptoZoo isn't Logan Paul's first crypto scam or pump and dump and run away with money. It's not the first one to happen in this influencer space. And it is nice to see somebody going after people because hopefully that'll stop people from taking advantage of others, because that's all these guys are doing. Simply promising something crazy with a project, making a bunch of money, throwing it to the side, moving on to their next grift. Maybe the actions or thoughts of a repercussion might stop a lot of people from going down that exact same path, and maybe we stop seeing scam after scam after scam taking place in crypto. That might be hopeful thinking. I mean, there's always going to be people who want to scam. There's always going to be people grifting. That's never going to go away. But if you can at least get the majority out, that'll help a lot. That's just kind of a quick overview of this whole thing. The class action lawsuit against Logan Paul by attorney Tom. It is absolutely refreshing to see this going on, to see somebody going after these people who are huge multi-millionaire influencers who have tons of money, but for some reason continue to try and siphon more out of their fans for no reason at all. It's not like these guys need the money. They are rich. The Paul brothers are rich, and they were in so many crypto scams, but hopefully holding some accountable, maybe get something out of Logan Paul from this whole thing, and actually scare away people from doing this, because it's been such a problem in the last few years that it would be amazing to see it all clean up and go away. But that's gonna do it for this video. As always, don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next video.